Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Hutton, and I'd like to thank you for joining our webinar today entitled Software Asset Management. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin the presentation. The audio for all attendees will be muted during the session. If you have any questions or any technical issues during the webinar, please submit them using the question box in the webinar control panel. This panel is usually located on the right side of your screen. Regarding questions, our speakers will answer as many questions as time will allow at the end of the presentation, but you're welcome to submit the questions anytime as we go through and you think of them, put them in the question box. And if you're having technical issues, we'll address those as they come up, again, through that question box. We'll be recording the session and making it available to you about 48 hours after the webinar ends. So watch for an email from us with a link to the recording. If you don't see it within that time frame, email us at info@nlyte.com to request the link, and it will also be available on our website. Now I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Mike Schmidt. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Karen. Next. I appreciate the time that you are all spending with us today to talk about some of the challenges around software asset management. Today, I am joined by Gary Paquette from our CTO's office. Gary has a strong background in asset management and discovery tools, and is a really good expert to provide some insight into us for today's topic. Next. For those of you that aren't familiar with InLight, I'll give a brief overview and then we'll get into the meat of the actual webinar. InLight, for a little over 14 years, has been providing data center infrastructure management and technology asset management solutions, helping IT organizations to reduce costs, optimize, and efficiently manage the entire technology portfolio and compute infrastructure. This includes power, cooling, assets, space management, and workflow. Our customers typically recognize a 20% cost savings in power consumption, 10% or more in total operating costs, and can extend the life of their data center and most of their assets 3 to 5 years or more. Our solutions provide a single source of truth for ITSM, BSM, building management systems, and business intelligence systems, providing a bilateral communication across these multiple systems, which improves transparency across your entire organization and reducing risk from workflow miscommunications or unregulated devices, such as software and network access as well. Next. InLight supports some of the most sophisticated IT teams around the world, while still providing an easy-to-use interface that's suitable really for any size organization. We have a broad spectrum of customers that we serve from a wide range of verticals and geographies. We've always prided ourselves on a well-proven architecture that's been adopted and supported by our partners, including IBM, ServiceNow, BMC, HPE, and many, many more. So along with our proven technology and global partnerships, we have a very easy to do business approach. And this is really our pride that we maintained a 98% customer retention rate. Next. Next. It's really core to our commitment to help our customers optimize the management of their IT portfolio. We simplify the visualization, management, and reporting on the status of asset lifecycle, workflow status, power utilization efficiency, software usage, and entitlement compliance. along with a rich array of out-of-the-box reports and dashboards, along with an extensive API to help customize your InLight applications to meet specific needs of your organization. So now we're going to get into the meat of the conversation. Managing your software is kind of like herding goats. It's all over the place, and it proliferates. And when it comes time to pay the piper, it can be a very frustrating experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary at this point and let him kind of start off talking about what some of the challenges are to begin with, and how we can help with that. Gary?
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to go over a little bit of why we're on this call, and as Mike was doing a great job of explaining what the InLight solutions do together, there's some specific disciplines within your organization that require a lot of focus and a lot of help with, and software asset management is one of them. So one of the basic whys of what's going on within the organization is, as we all know, things are growing exponentially in the distributed environments, and with people bringing in their own technology or being able to install specific services or applications, things grow organically within your environment. The lack of visibility is one of the big problems that a lot of people have today. They're more than willing, I'm sure all of you guys, or everybody on the phone today, is more than willing to do the right thing, but you can only do the right thing if you have the right information. So one of the problems that they have is the visibility. So some people have parts of the puzzle where they have some of the Windows information, they might not have the data center information, they might not have the desktop information, then you have the Linux platforms and all the other platforms. So you've got a kind of a chaotic mesh of data that doesn't intertwine into one central repository. Once you have collected that information, the other part that is important is actually matching what you have, either from a database perspective, because that's a highlight of the data center, to the physical and virtual world. Then what do you do for being able to reconcile all that information? How and what services are being delivered to the organization? So what do I have that needs to be delivered? How is it being delivered? And what is required from a licensing perspective based on the install base or on the usage of the applications or software itself? The other main reason that SAM is important, SAM being your software asset management, is how inaccurate some of the systems are. So you've just taken a snapshot a year ago, things have changed. So you can even do it today, and by tomorrow that information could be obsolete, and you're in need of making a business decision today. And that's where things get really complicated. You can't make a good business decision if you have all of these separate pieces of information, or if the information being provided to you is incorrect. So what are some of the risks involved in what you're doing today? Well, often what happens is that just to be able to CYA your environment, you end up paying for licenses that typically isn't required. So one of the things that you need to be able to identify is what is being used and also what is being supported. We've gone into organizations before where the help desk is supporting close to 3,000 applications, and that's because over the last 10, 15 years, they've never retired support. Why? Nobody knows who's using what. So the discipline of software asset management goes through multiple departments within your company, as you all know. Also, the security around the applications and knowing what you have. I can't tell you how many times we've seen torrent systems, like BitTorrent as an example, or some people will actually install games on server class machines, and they, after hours they're sharing a game as an example, or actually unapproved software where there's the end user might have all of the best intentions at their desktop, but at the same time it exposes the company from intrusion or anything else that's happening from an unapproved software perspective. Then you get into the whole audit game. And this is, basically the software companies are in business to sell software, and everybody wants to do the right thing. At the same time, you get into situations where you're going to have to understand what you owe and how do you self-audit yourself, or if you get an audit request, how are you going to actually perform that audit? And that's where everybody goes into sweat mode. Everybody starts scrambling left and right, trying to figure out what they purchased, what they have installed. And the biggest problem with that is that, you end up paying either fines or you having to reestablish those relationships with those publishers. As an example, they're service providers that provide you with the access to that software. Because don't forget, we always pay for the right of usage. You never really own the software. You end up with these unbudgeted expenses, especially when you get into an audit. An audit itself is very expensive. The process of going through that audit is expensive. The risk and mitigation around if you are non-compliant, what happens? So either you have to get these letters saying, you have to stop using this service, or we're going to have to disconnect you, or you lose the right until you actually perform this audit. Some are getting a little bit more aggressive, as you probably know, in this environment. And so it's important to really understand and control what you're doing from a risk mitigation perspective. The biggest one is the negative press. Most of you probably saw last year when the city of Denver got hit with a $10 million fine. That was one publisher and one publisher only, and they negotiated that audit down to $3 million. But that's still a lot of money. So you put yourself and the company at risk for something that you can do in a way that makes your life a lot simpler, from just understanding what you have and then matching that to what you've purchased. And like I say, sometimes the negative publicity is worth more than the actual fine itself. So you have to be real cautious about that. And then the audit disruption. And like I was saying, that it comes back down to the work involved, the scrambling to get all of the information. And this can take anywhere from weeks to months. And I've seen this drag into nearly a year for certain organizations where there was absolutely no control whatsoever. So how does the Nlyte Software Asset Manager help your organization? Well, our main goal is to help you understand and gain clarity to what has installed on it, or what service is being delivered, and what users are entitled to it. So think of software asset management is 20% technology, 80% process. And whatever can make that 80% easier in your life, the better you're going to be at performing the software asset management roles within your organization. So gaining clarity to the assets. So it doesn't make any difference if it's Unix or Linux or mid-range equipment or Windows or Macintosh. You need to know what you have across the board. It doesn't make any difference if it can be at the desktop, or it can be at the data center, or it can be a mix of both. So that visibility is really important. The entitlement is who has the right to access that software, either installed on your system or from a user application usage perspective. Then from that point, you need to be able to reconcile that against what you purchased. And as you know, the biggest concern that most organizations have is that none of the major publishers or vendors make your life easy. You're going to have, as the example for Oracle, the database side of things is going to be based on cores or processors. So you need to know from a hardware perspective now, how is that system configured? Some of it can also be dependent on services being delivered, other additional services or add-ons configured to it. So all of the parts of the puzzle need to be put together for you to be able to understand what it is. And why is it so complicated? Well, there's not one license that's the same. Microsoft doesn't license the databases the same as they do the Office suites or some of the other applications they have. SAP is the same way. They do the same thing where you can negotiate your own a license. So if you've negotiated it, then you have to enter it into the system to be able to do that reconciliation. And that's where the complexity comes in. And we're trying to move the clouds aside give you some visibility into what and how things are set up and how to actually keep that in check as you go along. Now, automation here is key. So being able to understand your user base, being able to understand the services you're delivering, and understanding the versions that you're running will help you get that compliance and control. And if you think about it, it also gives you visibility into a lot of the regulatory environments that we're getting into, like GDPR in the European community, and we're seeing it on other fronts now too, where if you understand what you have, you can link that back to its usage and what it contains. It also helps you reduce your costs. And basically what it comes down to is that why renew licenses that aren't being used? Why renew maintenance and support for items that you've retired? How do I take those older versions and upgrade them to newer versions and be able to negotiate that within my agreement? So again, it empowers you now to go to the publishers and turn the table around. They're coming after you for money. At the same time, now you can turn the table around and say, this is what we're doing. This is what we have installed. This is what we want to migrate to. How do I negotiate that? And so once you have that knowledge and they know that you have that knowledge, it puts the power back on your side of the table. Again, making the business decisions is always going to be in the garbage in, garbage out scenario. And one of the things we want to provide you is with the highest accuracy of information that you can have. Now, software asset management goes beyond things that are just licensed. And that's one of the parts that's important, especially for the security side. And we're going to deal with that a little bit more. But having version control, versioning understanding, and an understanding of the entitlements and how that changes over time and who's using the applications from the usage perspective, it gives you all the insight, gives you the pieces of the puzzle, and the Nlyte Software Asset Manager will help you put the pieces of the puzzle in the right place for you. From a risk management perspective, again, as you know, if you have a shortfall, you need to be able to see that shortfall. What is the shortfall? What's the shortage of licenses or shortage of entitlements to a specific service? The other thing, too, is that if you have metering in place, as an example, you want to be able to tell from a usage perspective who are your license hogs. So it's one of the things that we want to understand, that if you have metering and you've metered it for up to 1,000 concurrent users, and you're always at that 1,000, who's actually loading that application up in the morning, minimizing it for the course of the day, consuming a license, and never actually using the application. So again, you think you need to increase your license count, all to find out that somebody's consuming a license and not using the application. So it's another risk assessment that takes place. The other one is from security. The unapproved access to applications or applications that provide external access to the environment is key. So security wants to know what's installed. They want to know what it's being used as a service. If you look at the Equifax scenario with the Apache struts, our customers at a click of a button within 10 seconds knew how many Apache struts met that criteria that would allow people into the organization through a hacker's backdoor. So again, the security now is getting involved on the SAM side because it affects them, and their lack of insight into what you have becomes very problematic. So how does this all come together, and how does this work within the the Nlyte Software Asset Management? How does this work? Our scanning technology is proven technology. It's been used for decades now. It's an agentless based solution, and the nice thing is that it will actually crawl and walk your network based on the start and end point that we've told it to do. So it will actually go and discover. In other words, find assets, even though you don't know about it, it will find them, regardless if it's physical or virtual. And that's the nice thing about this, is that you don't have to install anything on the end node. You don't have to install anything to say, this is where I am. We don't really care. We'll walk through the network and we'll identify everything that's in that environment. Once we've identified those devices, we'll actually inventory them. So for the software asset management side, we'll collect all of the applications, services, daemons, process tables based on the operating system, and then collect that data and bring that back to you. Now you've got clear insight of how and what you had. The scanning technology will adapt very well to your infrastructure. We've seen exceptionally complicated network infrastructures to complex environments, and also congested networks and uncongested networks. So we've automated the process itself of getting the technology to throttle up and down, staying very quiet. It will keep itself fresh and up to date. It's based on a schedule. And then for environments that are disabled, where they disable a lot of the standard protocols, as an example, WMI might be disabled, then we have our own proprietary device inspector, and it's an intelligent protocol where Nlyte has basically said, don't be dependent on anything, talk directly to the operating system or collect information directly from the hardware itself. And that's important because we need to be able to bring up the accuracy and the quality of the data that's being presented to you, so that way you can make your business decisions. Then one part that's really important is when you have this data, it has to gain access to other parts of your infrastructure to be able to provide you with clear insight. And I was saying before, the 80% process side of things, if we can automate some of that, then that helps you make your business decision. And one way of doing that is linking it to your asset management system. The other one is hooking into your ERP integration systems like your SAP Financials, Oracle Financials, Microsoft Dynamics, JD Edwards, so that we can find and reconcile against your purchase orders or whatever your order management system is. We hook into also HR, so we can do things based on people within your organization and link that back to the service or the system, and also be able to do it the other way around, so this system is being used by this individual or these individuals within your organization. Lines of business reporting. Basically, we have reports that are more directed towards security on the software asset management side. Some are on the asset management side itself. One is on the fiscal responsibility, so the finance people want to get in and be able to see where they stand from a fiscal perspective. One of the things that we wanted to ensure for your side is we can't determine every report and think of every report that you're going to need. So we give you a plain English searchable engine where you can say, give me all of the Dell 600s that have Adobe Photoshop. It's that simple. The system will spit out the results, and it'll say, do you want the report in Excel or PDF? So we want to make your life a lot easier for me to be able to report on custom information that you need to be able to make your business decisions. Our system also has alerts capability. So if we detect something as we're scanning your environment and processing that data, if you want to know about a specific application or a specific category of applications or a publisher in particular, or anything just being installed, as an example from the software side, we can send that alert. So we can send it either to individuals or a group of people, or what most organizations will do is we'll send it over to service management, where a workflow engine will kick in and actually create an incident ticket for you. We also do what we call the application tracker, which is we can measure the actual application of the usage, I should say, of applications at the desktop. So on Windows desktops, this is Windows desktop oriented, we can tell you who's using what, for how long they're using it, foreground and background, and which version they're running. And if it's on the file server or in the cloud environment, where is the source of this application, all the way down to the version and build number of that application. So you can see how uniform it is, where that information is being delivered to the end user, or the application is being delivered, how long they're using it. Now this helps for retiring software not being used, seeing who's using old versions of applications. At the same time, it allows everybody to have some insight on which ones don't need to be renewed from a support and maintenance perspective. And then we link all of that information back from your LDAP and Active Directory system. So that way we know from a geographic perspective or from an access perspective who's controlling which applications, where they are. And that's the link also between the people and the systems within your infrastructure itself. So, Mike, I'll hand it back over to you as we're kind of coming close to the end of this presentation.
Mike, this is Karen. I believe you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. Gary, thank you very much for that information. It does seem to be a very interesting topic. We've got a bunch of questions that have come in. We probably won't get through all of these today, but we definitely will follow up with each of you individually and get your questions answered. Starting off the first one, Ting asked, earlier I heard you talk about operating cost savings of 10%. How specifically does your SAM software save me money?
That's a good question, Mike. The most of the time, once you have the visibility of what's being used and what's being installed and reconciling that to the services that are required within your organization, it now allows you, as I was saying before, to manage the renewals of the maintenance and support. You can never get your money back from what you purchased, but you can control what you're going to be able to do from a savings perspective on those renewals, or if you're going to renew at all. If nobody is using the software and you don't know about it, a lot of companies, what they do is they'll just automatically renew not to get into trouble. So if we can tell you who's doing what with those applications, the savings can be way above the 10% mark.
Great, thanks. Next question, Rajesh asks, you say you provide Microsoft licensing reports. What is in this report and how does it save me time with my quarterly entitlement audits?
So what we've done on the Microsoft side as an example, if we're going to use Microsoft specifically, is we've matched what Microsoft's requirements are for reporting applications or software entitlements back to them. And that goes from the database side, where there's particular hardware information that's required, to the install base itself, what is installed on it. So if you look at the Microsoft requirements from a licensing, if you look at the EULA, which I'm sure everybody's read every EULA they've installed, they have specific reporting criteria. And so what we've done to make your lives a lot easier is we formatted the reports based on specific publishers' needs. And Microsoft is one of them that we've done specifically in light of that.
Great. We have time for one last question. Like I said, we will follow up with all the additional questions individually with you, and also make sure that you all have a copy of this webinar for review later. Last question is from Samantha. You talk about security risks. How does this differ from software my security and network teams are already using? Aren't I buying some redundant software?
That's a good question. Most of the time, security is looking at things purely from an intrusion perspective. So what's enabled from a firewall perspective, what services can come through or into the environment, but security has very little visibility to what's installed already in an infrastructure or what's being installed. So if something's being installed from an IT perspective or even from an end user perspective that opens up access to the outside world, security tools typically won't be able to tell you that. So what they're looking for normally is to now work with the software asset management teams more and more to be able to ensure those breaches, ensure that the applications are up to date, they're keeping everything in check and balances. So it's an extension of what they typically have. So we see that more as a cooperation of solutions. So one part of the house is going to take a look at what's going to be access on the edge as an example. And then we're going to take a look and provide them the information, what they need from inside the house itself and within their infrastructure, what gives people internal access to the outside world or the outside world internal to the customer's environment. So it's very complementary at that point. Good question.
Excellent. That takes us to the top of the hour. Karen, you want to close us out?
Yes, thanks, Gary, Mike, thank you so much for being our speakers for this session, and thanks to everyone who attended. Please watch your email for a link to the recording that we'll be sending out in the next day or so, and also emails in response to any unanswered questions that were submitted. To find out more about Nlyte, visit us at www.nlyte.com or send me an email at karen.hutton, Hutton, @nlyte.com. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on future InLight webinars.